I love my children. Each time I see them, they bring me a smile to my face. For Aaron, though, it's different. We've been married for almost 4 years, and I can tell that he doesn't care for them the same way I do. Call it a mother's instinct. Of course, they would never admit that their father is ignoring them or spending less time with them, but I can tell. I first started noticing a significant change in him when I was announced I was pregnant with our second. He had just gotten home from a long double shift and was using our foot massager while I vacuumed the nursery. He had been smiling for a minute before I told him the news, and then all I heard from the den was silence. When I stepped in the room to see his reaction, all I saw was a mixture of frustration and anger. "Aren't you gonna say something?" I asked. "What is there to say, Val? We talked about this last year. We agreed you would stay on the pill." Aaron snapped as he turned the television off and stormed to the bathroom. At first, I thought it was just his usual anxiety that was causing him to act this way. After all, if we could barely take care of 2 children, how are we going to handle another? I tried to reassure him that everything would be fine. We would find a way to survive the same way we had before, but Aaron didn't want to hear anything I had to say. It was like he felt I had betrayed him. I knew that he wasn't ready for this responsibility, but another part of me felt this was God's will. Besides, he could not deny the fact that I was the best mother I could be. I have never had easy pregnancies, though. Our firstborn, Dylan, was nearly lost several times during the 9 months. Even our OBGYN told us it would have been better to terminate the pregnancy. Back then, Aaron had been more supportive. It was something we could face together with God on our side. I remember him squeezing my hand each and every time we saw an ultrasound. The doctor said there was no way I'd be able to carry Dylan full term. Aaron's tune changed, though, when he learned my life could be at stake. Several times Aaron tried to convince me just to go to an abortion clinic, but I was stubborn. I knew the moment I felt Dylan was growing inside me that I could never allow us to be separated. Then, 7 months pregnant, my OBGYN dropped me as a patient. I was devastated. He insisted that I was too high risk and that he could not have the blood on his hands. I didn't even know at the time a doctor could do that. I remember shouting at my husband angrily, trying to find out if he had some part to play in the act. Aaron, though, kept insisting he wanted what was best for me and that he didn't want to lose me. But I couldn't lose my baby, so we found a less than reputable clinic to perform a C-section on me at 38 weeks. We had to sign our lives away saying that we did not hold the clinic responsible if things did not turn out well. I knew that meant when I went under the knife, I might not wake up. Aaron had been kind enough to go home and paint the nursery, knowing that he might only bring our child home. When Dylan finally came into the world, I remember thinking he was the most beautiful baby in the world. The nurses didn't really give us much chance to stay for any post-op care, though, and I worried about the stitches from the C-section. They offered me little to no time to prepare myself for what I'd be doing at home, but honestly, I felt like they were judging me while I was there, thinking I was another lowlife that wanders the streets. Aaron kept me level-headed during those first few months. He tended to Dylan and took care of ordinary chores while I recuperated. Every move I made felt like pain shooting through my back and lower torso. It made me sad to think I couldn't hold my son or care for him, but every chance I got, I would go to the nursery and lay alongside the crib. Still, going through something like that, it's hard to move past when the entire experience wasn't pleasant. I started thinking about having another child. This time, I could get it right, I thought. I remember when I first brought up the topic, Dylan was about 9 months old. Aaron had been working late shifts again, so I'd spent more time with my baby. It was so pleasant to watch him sleep, to care for his every need. But still, I felt robbed of the joy that came along with cradling a newborn, being able to breastfeed, or even just playing with him during those first few months. When I told Aaron I wanted to try again, I remember he laughed. He listed off all sorts of reasons why we should be thankful for Dylan and not risk it. But by that time, my mind was made up. Then he tried to have some sort of intervention toward me. He had my parents and his parents meet us at some Chinese restaurant and explain all the medical reasons why being pregnant again was not healthy. Dear, I know what happened with Dylan isn't a fairy tale you wanted, but God was good to you and helped you survive that. Do you want to test fate a second time? My mom said. Tears welled in my eyes, and I realized everyone was on his side. They all seemed to think they knew what was best for me, but I wasn't backing down without a fight. I did my research on IVF and even surrogates, trying to fix a way for my dream to come true. Aaron kept insisting that it wasn't going to happen, but then, on our anniversary, I had other plans. Yes, I tricked my husband into having unprotected sex with me. Yes, I knew I hadn't been taking my birth control and that I was ovulating. Part of the risk was actually exciting. I knew as I rode him bareback, the chances of getting pregnant were high, and that just spurred me to go further. 2 months later, I bought a kit and smiled with glee after I found out the results. Positive. Finally. I didn't want to risk Aaron giving me the lecture, so I hid the pregnancy for as long as I could. It wasn't easy. I wore loose-fitting clothes and kept getting sick, and I blamed seasonal allergies and common health problems. Aaron found out about 5 months into the pregnancy, at the time I intended him to, when there would be no turning back. He was angry. He stormed out of the den without even saying a word. He left the apartment about 10 minutes after that. But I knew that he needed time to think. I went to the nursery and rocked Dylan. I told him how soon he would have a sibling. I felt a warmth and connection between us, and I knew he was happy to hear the news. When Aaron came back to the house, he quickly figured out when I had gotten pregnant and shouted a few things to me that I don't care to repeat. He was furious. He said he wanted nothing to do with me. I sat on the couch and cried when he was done. I wanted so bad for him to be on my side, but I should have seen this coming from a mile away. Still, even though he didn't like the idea of raising a second child, he did not argue with me anymore. It was too late at that point for an abortion, unless I would cite a medical reason to do so. Aaron listed off a few, but I didn't even want to consider the possibility. This was what I wanted. Of course, since I had a C-section the first time, it was natural that I would get the procedure again. We went to the same clinic as before, and I recalled even the nurses were surprised to see me again. It's just, after what happened, one said, but then failed to finish her sentence. All that really mattered to them was I was willing to pay, so they did it the next day. I went under anesthesia for the procedure, and I remember hearing my husband's voice asking something in the distance, like when shouting from an echo chamber. When the world returned to me, I was in my room, but there was no sign of my baby. I saw Aaron standing in the doorway, his arms crossed as he seemed lost in thought, and I moaned gently to get his attention. Hey, pretty lady, how are you? He said, kissing my forehead. Where's our baby? I asked him softly. Aaron frowned and looked at me. His expression wasn't of sadness, but frustration. Valerie, we can't do this, he said. Aaron, what did you do? I shouted. The nurses ran in to see if anything was wrong. I screamed bloody murder, horrified that my husband was even considering not letting me see my child. I have a right as a parent, I shouted. Finally, they calmed me down and brought our baby girl in. I smiled and held her in my arms as Aaron went to the window and stared out toward it. Then once they took her back and we were alone, he muttered, I want you to get your tubes tied. I looked back at him in shock. He was dead serious about the request. If you want me to agree to this, then you have to do it for me, Aaron said as he sounded like he might break into tears. I nodded dumbly, looking toward the skyline, as I cried softly and realized that this was the last miracle I would ever create. We got home from the hospital a few days later, and again I was sore from the procedure, but not nearly as bad as the last time. I allowed baby Audrey to sleep in the same crib as Dylan. They kept each other warm. At that point, Aaron became distant. He wanted me to take therapy, counseling, and even go to a facility, but I refused each and every time. I need to be here with my children. Still, he didn't really force me to do anything or show any signs of being dangerous to me or to the children until that moment when I announced for a third time that I was carrying his child. I won't go into details about how I got pregnant that time, but when he found out, he slapped me. I also wasn't very far along, so he insisted I needed to call a clinic. I refused and told him that God wanted me to have this third child. He called me insane. He called me so many other things. We started sleeping in separate rooms. I was always in the nursery, and he would sleep in the master bed. He called clinics to try to make appointments for me, but I never went to any of them. I knew he wanted to do terrible things to me and to his children, and I had to do what was necessary to protect them. Then one day I woke up and saw Audrey was gone. I searched the house frantic to find her. I couldn't imagine how someone had broken into the apartment, and then it dawned on me that it must have been my husband. Rage filled my body as I sat in the nursery and waited for him to come home. When Aaron entered the apartment, I was brandishing a knife. "Tell me where she is," I snarled. "Calm down, Val. Put the weapon down," he insisted. "Not until you give me my daughter back," I snapped. He held his hands up defensively and then took off his backpack and slid it across to me. I dropped the knife in a panic and opened it to see my little girl inside. "You're a monster," I snapped at him. "You're the monster here, Valerie," he said, and then went to his room and started to pack his things. "What are you doing?" I asked as I followed him. "Getting away from here. I endured this for almost 2 years, and I thought one day you would wake up," Aaron answered. "No, please. I'll need your help when the new baby gets here," I shouted. "That thing grown inside you is no more my baby than the furniture is." He snapped back and pushed me away. Then he left. I sat there and cried for about an hour. Audrey stared at me in silence. I touched my belly and tried to reassure myself that it was all going to be okay. I always knew this day would come. I picked up my baby girl and took her to the nursery to set her down alongside Dylan. But Aaron did come back. This time he wasn't alone. He had contacted several nurses that he worked with at the hospital. They all seemed to be of the opinion that I needed some kind of medical help. I refused to listen to them, to even think they could separate me from my children. But Aaron couldn't be dissuaded. The nurses administered some kind of anesthetic to knock me out. When I woke up, I was in a white, clean room. I didn't see my husband, only doctors that were wearing surgical gear. They told me that the operation was a success. I saw the scars on my body and I knew what had happened. I screamed and shouted at them to leave me alone. Only a sedative kept me from killing them. When I woke up again, I was in a room similar to one where I had first held Audrey. Aaron was there, and he had some papers for me to sign. I knew what they were. He had taken everything from me, and now, as one final slap in the face, he wanted to divorce. "Val, if you sign these, I won't have them commit you. Just sign them and we can both go about our lives," he pleaded. Some part of me still wanted to believe that he loved me, that he cared for our family, but I didn't want him to come anywhere near my children. I made sure to make that clear. Aaron agreed to the terms and I signed them without hesitation. It was the last time I saw him. I found a way home alone, constantly touching my scars to remind myself of the precious gift I had lost. When I got back to the apartment, I went to check on Audrey and Dylan. They both are always smiling. I saw that Aaron had been kind enough to take Audrey to be cleaned, and she looked as new as the day she'd come home. I sat in the rocking chair and soothed her, tears of pain cresting my cheeks. It felt so empty, without their sibling to be there with them. I couldn't imagine depriving them of that joy. I looked towards the 2 children I had there in the nursery, their lifelike smiles always searching for my approval. I knew I could find love again and complete my family. It was my duty as a mother to care for them. That meant that even death could not separate us. We would always be together. Each time I see them, they bring a smile to my face. I love my children.